Hi, I'm Jody Lane with Accelerated Medical Practices, and we host a monthly mastermind just for hormone clinic owners and providers. And it's designed to help you solve the real world challenges you face in your clinic every day. Each session starts with a short teaching topic, just like the one you're about to watch, led by the AMP team. Then we dive into live problem solving with the group. And whether you share, contribute, or just listen, you're going to walk away with something useful to improve or streamline your practice. It's low cost, it's no commitment, and you get the replay if you miss it. And because I really want you to check it out, I'm going to give you your first month absolutely free. Just email me at Jody, Jody, at acceleratedmedicalpractices.com with the word mastermind, and I'll send you the invite. You've got nothing to lose and a whole community to gain. So tonight, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what to track. And I want to start with a little story. It's very fresh in my mind. So I just hung up with a client that I've been working with for a little bit, and she and this is a tale, maybe not necessarily for the 2 or 3 people that are here right now, but more for people that are watching this on the recording. She was struggling with her practice because cash flow is really low. And when we started doing some digging, we started realizing that there were a number of issues going on with patients, with way payments were being processed, way people weren't renewing. Every single thing that is going on in this practice was 100% preventable just by tracking metrics, following up on a monthly basis. She's heard me preach about this for years, and now, unfortunately, she's experiencing it full stop. I just share that because I'm like all hyped up, but my emotions are really high, and I just can't say enough ways that tracking everything in the business is just really important. With that said, we'll go ahead and get started and start talking. And this presentation you may have seen before, but hopefully you'll hear it with different ears because your businesses may be in different places. So we'll dive right in. So obviously you can't manage what you don't measure. So case in point, my story that I started with, you cannot manage, you can't pivot, you can't fix, you can't do anything with your business if you don't know what's going on. So that's why tracking is so important. And obviously, we can relate that to our patient care, right? So if we just don't pay attention to symptom surveys or labs or any feedback from the patient, then it's almost impossible to make sure that they're optimized. And so hopefully when providers hear that, they can make the connection to the business because we can't optimize cash flow, we can't optimize revenue, net profit unless we know what's going on. So what are we going to do today? We're going to talk about who should track results, what results we're tracking, and how best to track results. So who should track results? The truth is that you, the business owner, should be the first person to ever start tracking results. Now, it's wonderful to have a practice manager or a consulting company or anybody else to do that work for you. And if you've got the funds to bring somebody on board that can do that, then it almost feels natural that I'm going to take care of patients and you take care of the business. However, it's really important that the business owner understands what's being tracked, how that data is being collected, because staff come and go, consulting companies and agencies come and go, but you, the business owner, do not come and go. And so if you're left without knowledge of how to gather all that information, then it's just as bad as not doing it at all. If you've got a team, if you have the means to hire and work with other people who can keep you accountable, that's fantastic. Do that on month 3 or 4 and do the work yourself first. Because this is a high level task, obviously you want to pick someone, if you are going to at some point pass it over to somebody else, pick someone that you trust, not just to do the work correctly, but to get it done. In my original story, this provider thought that somebody was doing the work, and we come to find out the work was not being done. And so without somebody that you know is going to do it, and without checks and balances, just because we pick somebody that we think is trustworthy doesn't mean other things won't come up. That person may not understand the severity of it and let things go. So put checks and balances in. And like I said before, consider doing it yourself for a few months to build the habit before you pass it off to somebody else. And make this task, whether it's to yourself or to somebody else, a non-negotiable. There's a lot you can do if you see the metrics are starting to change and fail. There's very little you can do when you realize it just a little bit too late and there's zero in the cat in the bank account and not very many patients paying their membership fees. So, consistency is better than perfection. We can all be consistent. Perfection is impossible. So, obviously, we all want to be perfect, but consistency is definitely the goal here. So, what results are we tracking? KPIs, key performance indicators. I wanted to throw that in there because sometimes we hear that term and we don't really know what that means. Key performance indicators are basically any metric that you put in place that tells you something about how you are doing. And so I call them metrics, benchmarks. KPIs is a modern term for it. Either way, whatever you call it, basically it's some piece of data that you're collecting that tells a story that allows you to make decisions about things that you should or should not be doing in the practice. And then there's the other side of the coin. Don't track everything. So this usually happens when somebody gets excited or they really start to see the value in tracking and they sit down and they make a list of everything they're supposed to track and it's a mile long. And so ask yourself these questions about the things you're going to track. What do you want to know? What do you need to know? And what are you going to do with this information, either now or in the future? What do you want to know? Obviously, that's pretty clear. What do you need to know? So there's a difference between need and want. They're both important, but deciphering the two might help with time. But I like this last bullet. What will I do with this information now and in the future? Why do I say in the future? Because you may realize that there's something that you want to track and you're not really going to do anything about it now, but seeing those results month over month or even year over year will give you a bigger picture to the practice than if you just look at them on a month to month basis. So it's really hard to go back in time to gather all that data if you're not tracking it consistently. So if you think you're going to do something with it in the future, go ahead and start tracking it now. Only track what you need. It's much easier to sit down and make a list of all possible KPIs you could track and it's much harder to pull those reports together. So sitting down and making the list of the 50 things you want to track takes you an hour. Tracking 50 things could take you 5 hours. So again, just be careful because if you track too much and it takes too long, there's a potential for you not to do it at all. So what are some of the things we could be tracking? Financials, total gross, very important. Total net, very important. Cost of goods sold, overhead fixed expenses, income by category, and income by provider. I'll tell you that last one. I like the income by provider. Here's a story that one tells you. If you have multiple providers and one is producing more income than another, couple of things could be happening. One is more patients are requesting that provider. It could be that provider upsells more. It could be that provider has a better way of explaining the things that are ancillary that are involved in the treatment program. So I really like tracking that income by provider so that you can tell a little bit more than just what money's coming in, but you actually can use it as a coaching tool to sit down with the other providers that aren't producing as much to find out why. Because when a provider is producing more income, what's happening? The patient is walking away with more. If the patient's walking away with more, chances are they're getting a better result because we're not selling them widgets, we're selling them supplements, we're selling them more labs, we're selling them things that assist with their care. So that's a good one to add to your list if you're not already doing. Sales and marketing, number of leads. So obviously the number of leads in total for the month, source of those leads. So whether you're using tags or you're segmenting in some way, you want to know which campaigns or which sources are bringing in different leads. Now, I'll be cautious about that because it's not always very linear. Used to be when we had three marketing tactics total at our disposal, you could tell exactly which tactic was working. Now things are much more synergistic and they may go to your Facebook page, then go to your website, and then go download a lead magnet and then book a consult. So it's not like you're really going to judge each campaign or each thing specifically off of this, but that knowledge helps you again to tell a bigger picture. Number of inbound calls, number of booked initial consults, and then number of planned signups or purchases. So just because we've got a booked consult doesn't necessarily mean that we have a new patient. So we want to know how many of those booked consults become new patients. And you can even do ROI by going back to the leads and seeing which one of those purchases are coming from which lead, which is a lot easier to do if you've got tags. Now, unfortunately, that data probably lives in two different softwares, so it could be a manual process if you don't have some sort of a connection on the back end. But I will say that it is worth the time. Number of cancellations, that could be cancellations of plans, it could be cancellations of appointments, it could be cancellations after the first year. Really think through what cancellations you want. And then obviously, again, that tells a story. Why are they canceling? It's very manual, but I used to keep a spreadsheet, a Google sheet of exactly which patients canceled and their reason. Because if you get a whole bunch of moved, okay, there's not much you can do about moved, but maybe you want to add telehealth. Or if it's didn't like the provider, let's see what the provider was. Maybe it was financial. Financial could be they were running out of money. It could be you increased your prices. So the why to these tracking mechanisms are really what's telling the story. And then of course income by category, which helps with being able to track your goals versus what actually happens. And I also think that tracking monthly is really valuable. Why monthly versus anything else? If you're just tracking quarterly or annually, oftentimes too much time has gone by before you can make any sort of a change. So we all know I love quarterly meetings. I'm a big fan of quarterly meetings, and I love looking at the metrics on the at the quarterly meeting and really diving into where you are at that spot of the year. But unfortunately, if you have 3 months in a row where something's not going well, it's really hard to get those 3 months back. You can make changes for the future, and that's great, but you can't go back and get those 3 months back. So if you're doing it on a monthly basis, you're going to notice things that you can make impact on a lot better, a lot faster, and hopefully save what could have gone awry. And know where you're getting the information from. Make sure to know where you're getting the reports from. If somebody is sending you reports, that's fantastic. But if you don't have access to that report, that's a problem. For example, let's just say that your bookkeeper is the one that's sending you your profit and loss statements. That's fantastic. That's what you pay them for. But if you don't have a login or you don't know how it's set up in QuickBooks, if you lose that bookkeeper, now you've lost everything. So it's wonderful to hire people to do the grunt work after things are set up. And I'm 100% in support of that. You don't need to be doing that after it's all set up, but make sure that you know how it's being done, where it's coming from, and how it's organized so that if that person walks away, you can do it in the meantime, or you can train the next person to go ahead and pick up where that last person left off. And try before you start. This takes some time. So I like to do a little trial run the first time that you set up all your metrics. And the reason that run exists is a couple things. One is it's going to be clunky at first, right? You're not going to exactly know where to pull all the data from. You may be searching around, and it's going to take a little bit more time. But once you really have it all dialed in, you can then predict how much time that will take. Because in a second, I'm going to tell you to start scheduling it on your calendar. So you want to schedule an appropriate amount of time. If you only schedule 30 minutes, but your trial run took you an hour and a half, you're obviously not going to have enough time. So the first time you do it, just pay attention to how much time it took, figure out all those mistakes that you might make so that you don't make them again, so that it's a little bit faster, and then learn and then do. And then, of course, schedule it. So once you know how long it will take, go ahead and put those dates on your calendar that you're going to pull the data. And then you want to also have an appointment on your calendar. It could be the same time where you're going to talk about it. And you want to make these appointments this as similar to a patient appointment. As a matter of fact, if you use an EMR, I recommend you put it on the EMR as a meeting, because we all know that our Google calendars or our Outlook calendars are for us, and we can easily move things, but patient calendars, they're a lot more solid, and your staff is less likely to put something on your calendar if you already have something on your patient calendar. So go ahead and put it there and make them non-negotiable. But again, if you have it as a calendar entry and you need to move it, then you do that. You move it, you don't cancel it. So you just reschedule it right away. And accountability. If you are somebody that is concerned that you're not going to get the work done, just pick somebody. It doesn't have to be anybody special. Obviously, if it's a consulting company like AMP, or if it's a senior level staff member, that's your accountability partner, that's ideal because that person's going to actually sit down with you and go over the data. But maybe it's just your spouse that you're like, hey, can you remind me on the 30th if I haven't done my tracking that I need to get that done? And just so there's somebody else that's paying attention, or maybe you have a calendar entry on the 5th of the month to do the month prior, but you also have a calendar entry on the 10th that says, hey, did you do it? So that way you're almost like your own checks and balances, your own accountability partner, so that you make sure that work gets done. And then what do you do with the data? There's a couple of things you can do. You can meet with your senior staff or your advisory committee if you have any of that. Again, you can meet with your consulting company. Share the goals versus actuals. That's probably one of the most high level things to do, is to look at what you said you were going to do versus what you actually did. Because when you make those predictions, you make them thoughtfully. And so you want to discuss then what went well and make a list of the reasons you think those actuals went well. And then also make a list of the things that didn't go well, because we want to do more of what worked and less of what didn't. And then list out actions that you're going to take to improve performance. And then at the next meeting, start by reviewing that list. So if you, even if you just have a Google sheet that you just list out each month and you put what your action items are, open that Google sheet back up the next month and see if you checked off those boxes. Now, if you checked off all the boxes and still things didn't improve, it's time to be creative, think outside the box, and try to find new things to make improvements. You can make excuses or you can make progress. You choose. And there's our Brian Tracy, my little sales guy that I love. So, how best to track? First, keep it simple. So, Excel spreadsheets, Google spreadsheets, they really work fine. There's a lot of fancy data boards and things you can set up. And I'm all for that if you've got the ability to do that. But it takes time to set those things up. And I've seen clinics who were going to do that. And here it is a year, 2 years later, and they still haven't set it up. So therefore, they're not doing the tracking. So if time is an issue, just set up an Excel spreadsheet. Always have the goal or the KPI versus the actual so that you know how you did. And be transparent and let the people you work with see what. Now, that's a personal choice. Not everybody likes to be transparent with numbers, but at least have somebody in your office that can share with you what's going on a day-to-day basis, know what those numbers are, so that way they can really help you figure out what is happening in the field or in the office that is translating to those numbers. Share them with your consultants that you work with, and of course, track monthly or quarterly if monthly is just really not possible, because consistency is key. Now, why do you do this? You've got to know your why. What's your reason for being in business? What's your reason for making money? When you can really connect with your why, then there's no reason not to do this. We talk about this in weight loss all the time. It's so much easier to stay on a diet or stay in a workout program if you've got a vacation coming up, or you have a wedding to go to, or a high school reunion and you want to look your best. That same philosophy can translate to your business. So your reason for being in business could be different than your reason for making money. But when you connect with your why, it makes it a little bit easier to do those things that maybe you don't like to do or a little bit hard to do. And it will inspire you to keep that going. So remember what your why is.